In this video, I'd like to discuss the use of wrapper scripts, making backup copies, and using tarballs to manage files and to back things up. First thing I want to do is I want to show you a wrapper script. This is an actual wrapper script that I use in my environment right now at work, where I basically make a copy of a scheduling tool. It's a reservation tool that I created for my lab. And I wanted to preserve a copy of what was there because I'm overwriting this file every time I do this, because I don't need to have the reservation for the equipment on every page, but I want to retain that history for management purposes so that my manager comes in and says how many people are using the lab. I can go back through my archive and concatenate that using grep and sort and all that sort of thing. So what you're doing basically with the wrapper script is you're taking and coming up with a way of capturing the file, copying it over to a subdirectory that's hidden, in this case .test, and appending the date suffix to it, hour and minute, because I'm in that file from time to time during the day. So the wrapper script makes a copy, allows me to edit the file, and then copy what I just edited. So I have a copy before and after. Now the reason I do this is because I get busy and sometimes I'll forget to use the wrapper script and I'll go in and edit the file manually. This is just an extra safeguard. I have two copies with basically the same information, the before and the after. They should match. But if I screw up, I've got a backup. And the reason I do this, because I make mistakes. So what I've done in the real world is I've taken this wrapper script.sh and I just basically created a symbolic link that goes updt, which is a shorthand. And when I look at the directory, I see that and I just type updt. It throws me immediately into the VI session for reserved.html. I edit the file, exit out, and it takes care of it for me. So that's the wrapper script part. Then the next thing I want to show you is another script that I use when I'm creating a web page on my server. This is going to be a rather involved script, which is kind of cool. It's a real world script. But the reason I'm showing this is I'm creating a backup of files on this system because I've made mistakes in the past and I've learned about the Wayback Machine, which is really cool if you're managing a website. I wrote a Perl script that I had one little special character wrong and I wiped out all my README and index and header and footer files. So when you do that once or twice, you begin to create tools to prevent that sort of thing from happening. And that's what the result of this was. You can see in my variable definition, I've resolved all these things. The reason I do this is because I changed my web server from SUSE to Mint to whatever, Debian. I change different versions. If the release cycle on a particular distribution of Linux gets a little crazy, I'll switch to a more stable one. I was on Mint for a while, but they were such a rapid change that I went back to SUSE. I tried different distributions. So I'm creating my scripts that I use on a daily basis so they're flexible in that way. All right, the meat of the script starts down here where I make the directory Z. Now I'm creating a Z directory because I've directed my Apache server not to display the Z directories. When you create your http.conf file, you basically exclude that file. Nobody can see that. It's like a hidden file. Now I have that information out there and I can look at it as long as I know to type Z in. So I'm moving all these files into the Z directory. I'm copying them over and creating a new one. I have a base that I have for these things. I have a web directory where I have my archived copies of the current version of README. And then of course this is all a script that does a bunch of things to manage images. And when I get all done, I take the file at the bottom and I move that list that I used to create the list of images into the Z directory. Now I overwrite that because it's just a transitory part of a script to build this page, all that HTML. And if you look at my website, johnmeister.com, and you look at the year and then go down to a month and day, you'll see all that HTML file. And that file lists all the pictures that I took that day. You can see up on the top there, Perl is used to create a string that's basically the HTML. So this script not only does a backup of all these copies, but it also takes and creates the web page that I'm using. One more thing that I want to show you, and that is that when you get all done with all this stuff and you have a group of these files and you want to archive them, then the next thing you do is you create a tarball and move it off. So you do a tar, create, you can do verbose, and I'm going to compress this. I'm going to list all the files. I'm going to compress it at the same time as Z. And I'm going to call this thing script.tar. I do that, and I didn't do it right because I forgot one part, and that is the current directory. Okay, so now I have my tarball. You can see that it's there. If I do a file on script.tar, It's a gzip compressed file. In order to extract, I would do tar xvfz script.tar, and then I can redirect that somewhere. Let's go back and hit escape K, 0 to go to the beginning line, and I'm going to change that X because I don't want to extract, I just want to display it. So I go to T, and there's the contents of the files. I look at my line listing, and now I have a backup of these scripts, so if I fat finger something or do something stupid, I have a copy, provided of course I didn't delete the script.tar file. So as part of a backup process or scheme, I would then take this script.tar file and I would move it someplace safe. I can move it up a directory, I can move it into a storage bin. Let's just move it up a directory. So I've got a copy of this file now. Now I have a backup copy of what I just did. As you get more involved in your system, you'll have more advanced ways of doing this. What I typically do as an admin is I have one machine that I host to do all this stuff from. And you can notice from the run scripts that I've created and shown that I'm moving things to one central location. And then I can basically back up that one on a CD, archive it to a tape, whatever. Now, typically in a corporate environment, you're going to have a backup system that's going to be run. These backups are more for you as the sysadmin to manage things. Now, of course, you can do a daily backup, incrementals and weekly and monthly, and archive this stuff offsite, but you're not going to want to mess around with that stuff. You want to have your own little backup scheme going to protect you against yourself. So these little tricks of running a tarball off the script once I get it done, using a wrapper script, using the make page script to move files into a subdirectory as I edit them, so I have an archive copy, the last version. Now, one of the things you have to do is trim this from time to time and manage it so that you don't have a big bloat. So you're going to have to come in and manually clean this up. There's rotation logs that are done through cron jobs on most systems. If you do a cron tab E as root, you can possibly see those things running on your system, and they will take and trim those packages down, and over time they'll delete those things. These are things you have to think about when you're creating these backups because you're starting to fill up hard drive. That was the discussion on wrapper scripts, making backup copies of files as you edit them, and the use of tarballs to create an archive that you can move around from one system to another or just to preserve that information.